Cahirley, and I'd like to welcome the Minister of the House and thank him for taking this important adjournment debate in relation to direct provision for asylum seekers. As you know, decisive action is required in relation to this. We have been criticised both at home and abroad in relation to our current structures, and we need an independent appeals mechanism, but we also need legislation to ensure a fairer system for those seeking asylum in this country. I'd like to thank the students of Public School in Brisgana and their teacher, Lisa Stanford, for inviting me in to debate this issue in their class, and they're very concerned and they're involved in a project in relation to highlighting this issue, because what we have is a situation where people who are seeking asylum in this country, some of whom will go on to become citizens, are being treated in appalling circumstances at this moment in time. And while the current Minister, Mr. Shatter, and he was in opposition, the man who now has the ability to change this system, which he saw so flawed when he was in the other side of the House, now doesn't seem to have any urgency in relation to the issue. Also, the Labour Party were also critical of it while in opposition, and again, don't seem to have urgency when it comes to addressing the matter after nearly 2.5 years in government. Emily Riley, the ombudswoman, did bring a number of reports to government and was concerned and raised her concerns in relation to the asylum seekers. And you know, the 2/3 of those at that time when she was speaking of asylum seekers were in direct provision for about 3 years, when it is government policy that they should be there for only 6 months, and yet that promise by the Minister for Justice at that time and previous Minister for Justice was not fulfilled. At that time, Emily O'Reilly, who is now European Ombudswoman, raised the possibility of child abuse because of the circumstances of which they're living in the close quarters. They're having negative health effects, mental and physical health effects, and the Council of Europe warned about our asylum seekers and our process in 2012 when they said there were negative consequences on their mental health, family ties and integration prospects. And that goes back to my earlier point, whereas this is their first port of call. This is how they're treated in what in some cases will become their new country, and for them to go through a system which has been so criticised by organisations both at home and abroad, and yet for no action to be taken in the last 2.5, now 3 years of the government, I suppose beggars belief. And I suppose it is ultimately the Minister for Justice who is responsible. I'm disappointed he's not here tonight, and maybe I could read out some of his criticisms of the system when he was in opposition and ask him why, as the Minister, the man who has the power to change the system, why he hasn't tackled this. And I hope he will listen to the campaign of Public School in Brisgana and others who are trying to highlight this issue, because of course asylum seekers don't have a vote. Therefore, going to politicians asking for them to do something, and I suppose going to the government, who when in opposition were critical of the system, does not seem to be bearing any fruit. So I'd ask the Minister maybe to read the reply that he's gotten from Minister Alan Shatter, and you know, see if we can make some progress on this very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Minister McKinley.
And I am responding here, in fact, on behalf of my colleague Minister for Justice and Equality, Alan Shatter TD, who is incidentally in Templemore this evening, where they are announcing the new recruitment drive for the Garda Síochána and so on, which I'm sure where he's doing it.
Officially this time.
Yeah, so I'm sure the Deputy, the Senator welcomes that move anyway. The Minister has responded this year to over 50 questions on direct provision and has addressed this subject in this House several times, most extensively in response to the Senate private member's motion on this matter on the 23rd of October last. Therefore, much of what I have to say here today has already been said before. I should also point out that there are legal challenges to the direct provision system which are likely to litigate in the High Court next year. By way of context, I should firstly point out that there are currently 4,381 persons residing in 34 accommodation centres managed under the contract to the Reception and Integration Agency of the Department of Justice and Equality. 3 years ago, at the end of 2009, there were 6,494 persons residing in 54 centres. So the number of centres and the number of persons residing in them have decreased by a third in the space of 3 years. The Minister is not saying that this is an issue which will disappear over time. Rather, the point is that the issue has been managed and controlled. The efforts of the Minister and the efforts of his department will continue to further reduce the numbers of persons in direct provision. The Minister hopes that the new arrangements he has recently introduced to deal with outstanding subsidiary protection applications will contribute to this. He equally hopes that the passage of an amended Immigration and Residence Bill next year and the introduction of a single procedure will make for a more efficient and effective procedure. The Minister is aware that the Irish Refugee Council proposals on an alternative reception system for people seeking international protection. The Reception and Integration Agency will be shortly meeting the IRC at their request in order to enable them to elaborate on its proposals. What I would make clear at this stage in regard to that paper is that it is notable that the document states that the proposals set out therein are addressed on the basis that Ireland is now receiving less than 1,000 new asylum claims a year. The reality is that asylum tends to fluctuate and that we cannot assume that this will remain the situation. Moreover, changes to the asylum system itself, including reception conditions, can and do impact on the number of asylum claims that are made, and that this also needs to be borne in mind. It would be wrong, therefore, to ignore this pull factor. While the state has an important obligation to provide refuge for those in genuine need of protection and asylum, and it is crucial that we comply with our national obligations in this regard, it's also appropriate to acknowledge that a significant number of those who have during the years sought asylum here have been economic migrants evading our immigration and visa requirements, whose personal narratives have ultimately proved to be both untrue and unreliable. The state at this time cannot afford to provide support and accommodation for individuals who so behave. I would like also to take this opportunity presented by the debate to restate a number of points about the direct provision system and how it has operated. A key point to be made, and this is a very important point of Ireland, is that not once has an asylum seeker arriving in this state been left homeless. This cannot be said for several other EU states. The Minister has said on several occasions that while the direct provision system is not ideal, it facilitates the state in providing a roof over the heads of those seeking asylum or seeking to be allowed on humanitarian grounds to stay in the state. It allows the state to do this in a manner that facilitates resources being used economically in circumstances where it is under financial difficulties. If the state was to allow all asylum seekers to avail of full social welfare supports, including rent supplement, the immediate impact would be for all asylum seekers, including those not currently in accommodation provided by the Reception and Integration Agency, to avail of this financial support. As matters stand, not all asylum seekers live in direct provision accommodation, as they are not compelled to do so. Accommodation provided for those who cannot provide accommodation for themselves and do not have friends, family or others in the state who are willing to provide accommodation for them. Some asylum seekers live with friends or family or provide from their own resources for their accommodation needs. The accommodation system cannot be in place solely in its own context. It is inextricably linked with the surrounding international protection process. An amended Immigration, Residence and Protection Bill will be published next year, the purpose of which will be to substantially simplify and streamline the existing arrangements for asylum, subsidiary protection and leave to remain applicants. It will do this by making provision for the establishment of a single application procedure in order that applicants can be provided with a final decision on all aspects of the protection application in a more straightforward and timely fashion. The direct provision system remains an important element of the state's asylum and immigration system, and the Minister has no plans to end it at this time. The Minister accepts, however, that the length of time spent in direct provision accommodation and the complexity of the asylum process are issues that need to be addressed. This resolve, therefore, is to deal with the factors which lead to delays in the processing of cases in order that asylum seekers spend as little time as is necessary in that accommodation system.
Thank you very much indeed, Minister. Any final
Yeah,
questions?
I'm obviously disappointed with the reply and the last paragraph where the Minister has no plans to end it at this time. When he was in opposition, he had every plan and all the energy, and what he wasn't going to do wasn't worth mentioning, yet when he gets into a position to make a change, he isn't willing or seems able to do it. And I do note that he seems to have a little bit of sarcasm when he says he's over 50 Dáil questions on direct provision and addressed this House on it. Yet I do find it amazing, and I'm sure you find it amazing as well, that his new proposals, despite all these questions and debates in relation to the issue, that his new proposals to make changes to the reception system, which the Irish Refugee Council have put alternative proposals towards, that now the Reception and Integration Agency, for which he is in charge of, is only getting around to meeting them in 2014. I find it amazing that a man who has answered the question 50 times in the Dáil and has had a debate here has not instructed the Integration Agency to meet with the Irish Refugee Council prior to now, and indeed they still haven't met. So I'm obviously disappointed with the reply, but I thank the Minister for coming into the House on behalf of Minister Shatter, and I hope that maybe a bit of time in opposition might see Minister Shatter regain some of the enthusiasm and maybe find the notes that he was using on previously, where he was going to change the direct provision system when he got into power.
Thank you, sir.